and throughout our programs, we change lives. And we give kids opportunities to make the right choices. The other reason it's a great night tonight is because we're doing a very special dedication tonight. In fact, we're celebrating the life of Jerry Whitehead, the sheriff of Union County, the former sheriff of Union County. You know, when Maria and I went to the service and we stood in that line for hours, and we were talking to people. And we got talking and learned so much about what other people knew about Sheriff Whitehead. And all we heard were the great things that he had brought to his community. The love that he had for his family. The idea that being a sheriff meant helping others. And that just really, really hit home with us. You see, I met Jerry Whitehead. I met him when he was a young sheriff. His father, John Whitehead, had been retired and invited me to join their hunt club. Now, whatever they're feeling about hunting, but I was invited to join the hunt club, and I did. And so I met Jerry through that hunt club and getting out there, and they would have a cookout on opening day, and it would be a nice celebration. But there was a time, though, that I always have shared, and I shared this with Sheriff Whitehead, Brad Whitehead, his son, and I shared this moment. In 1989, November of 1989, on the opening day of hunting season, there was a phone call made to the Union County Sheriff's Office. And it was a phone call that there had been a death in a family, and that was my family. And word got out that there had been a death and that I needed to be found. And they formed a search. The phone call went out. It got radioed to Sheriff Whitehead. They got a search going and found me in a tree stand. Found me way up in the air, honking the horn and yelling my name, and got down and were there for me when they told me about my sister's death. And I will never forget that. I will take that to my grave, the compassion that was shown to me that day by a group of people and by a sheriff. And I know that he shared that with others. But it's not for me to talk all night, and what I want to do is I want to introduce, one of the reasons we're here celebrating is we had a very special gift given to us by the Florida Sheriff's Risk Management Group, and it was $50,000 in a generous donation to celebrate Jerry Whitehead. And I would like to call up the executive director now, former sheriff, retired sheriff, David Harvey, to say a few words in memory of Sheriff Whitehead as we celebrate.
On behalf of the Florida Sheriff's Risk Management Fund, and many of you really don't know what the Florida Sheriff's Risk Management Fund is, but Sheriff Whitehead was on that board for about 12 years. I had the privilege of being one of the founding sheriffs, but it has a rich history going back to 1978. Sheriff Reed is here, he's on the board. I would say probably one of the first best thing that the Florida Sheriffs ever did was the Florida Sheriffs Association, which is whatever, 100 years old, whatever it is. And then secondly, the Florida Sheriff's Youth Ranch clearly was the crowning star. The Florida Sheriff's Risk Management Fund's kind of in the wings, and essentially what we do is make sure that if a sheriff is sued, if a sheriff has a fatality, if a deputy is killed in the line of duty, if he has a car wreck, if a deputy is injured, we're there to make sure they have coverages. And back in, when I got elected sheriff in 1976 and took office in 77 with Jerry's father, John Whitehead, we couldn't get insurance. So since 1977, until the 3 years ago that I was hired as executive director, that fund has grown, and we've been able to make sure sheriffs throughout the state have proper coverages when we get sued. and have these injuries and fatalities and other situations. So that's very briefly what we are. I will mention the board. Of course, Sheriff Whitehead was replaced by Sheriff Hobb. Sheriff Esslinger is on the board in Seminole County. Sheriff Campbell, Lynn County. Sheriff Reed Hamilton. Sheriff Dobson and Baker. Mascara, St. Lucie. Benton Highlands. And Darnell, Alachua County. And those sheriffs, when Sheriff Whitehead died, you know, it was like a loss in a family in terms of that board, because many of those sheriffs have been on the board for you know, decades. I was on that board for 34 years. So very quickly, and I think it was Sheriff Reed that made the motion, the fund agreed to make a donation to the Florida Sheriff's Youth Ranch in the amount of $50,000. So we've been honored as a board, and Sheriff Whitehead as a former board member, to have his name placed over the hall here, the dining hall. I will tell you this very quickly. Quick story. Sheriff Whitehead's father, when I took office in 1977, and he was the dean of the sheriffs at that time. He was also, I think, the president of the association. And Jerry would have been fairly young. I'm not sure where he would have been working. I forget. But in any case, I asked Sheriff Whitehead, Senior, I said, well, what kind of advice, because I'm 27 years old, brand new sheriff. I couldn't even spell sheriff. And Sheriff, I said, what kind of advice, Sheriff Whitehead, would you give a young sheriff like me? And he said, well, Sheriff, and he had a big cigar, and that Stetson. He said, I'm going to tell you what, like my mama told me. He said, get the money, honey. He said, get it honest if you can, but get the money. Now, anybody that knows the Whitehead family knows that there's nobody that can tell a story better than a Whitehead. John Sr. and then Junior and now the new Sheriff Whitehead, all of them inherited it. And so most of us, we tell a story, but we know we were going to get a beating in the long run. Let me mention one other thing, and I say this with some trepidation, but Jerry was the dean of the Florida Sheriff, and when he was not the dean of the Florida Sheriffs when he hired me. I was the dean. So he wound up the board hiring me to be executive director 3 years ago. And I said, well, Jerry, I'd like to become the executive director of Florida Sheriff Risk Management Fund. And I said, if you vote for me, that'll make you the dean of the Florida Sheriff. So I knew I had his vote. The others were but then after he took office, after I began that, he was in his 8th term, and I was in the 3rd year of my 9th term. Well, of course, I used to tell him, Jerry, you've earned it, you deserve it, you need to think about slowing down, being with those kids and retiring, and you don't need to run for a 9th term because you've earned it. He said, Harvey, he said, I'm going to run one more term just to be the longest serving sheriff to beat you. And he would have, for certain, because he was so popular. But on behalf of the board, let me say that I could get Harold Reed up here. We could tell stories all night long about Jerry Whitehead. Many of you know them. You young men that are here today, I just got to tell you, every time you walk underneath walk into this dining hall and you see that name, remember how much he did, not only for Union County, and we all know that Union County's had a tough year, losing their sheriff's mother, Mr. Marvin Pritchett, and we're hoping and praying that Union County will have better years soon, and they will, trust me. But when you young men walk into this hall, remember what the Whitehead family did not only for Union County, but the Sheriff's Youth Ranch, the FSA, the many other things. I can remember one story about Sheriff Whitehead talking about raising children before the youth ranch ever started. That they would go out and help children, and his family would raise children because they didn't have a place to put them. So with that, I'm going to ask you to give the Florida Sheriff's Risk Management Fund Board a round of applause.
Thank you, Sheriff. You know, I was just thinking out there, and we're fixing to invite the family up for the litany, and I'd ask that the family go ahead and start coming up. I'd like you to stand here and join me in the litany. You go ahead and start making your way up, and then as they were making their way up, I was thinking about this dedication of this hall here, and I was thinking about all the meals on that hunt camp. And then I was thinking about Jerry White. I was thinking about Sheriff Whitehead and his group. He used to come out here when we have New Sheriff's Day, and they used to do that corn on the cob boil, and they would have fresh corn on the cob. So I just can't think of a more appropriate thing to dedicate than our meal hall, because there was just a lot of good food in all those different areas. So if you will join me in the litany. As a hall to where children may grow, play, and learn. We dedicate this place to God. That this hall may serve as a place for life, change, education, exploration, and fun. We dedicate this place to God. Because this place was made possible in memory of Sheriff Jerry Whitehead. We dedicate this place to God. And thanks to you, Lord, for guidance, wisdom, mercy, and grace. We dedicate this place to God. And we thank you for the wonderful blessing, and thank you for being here and joining us for this dedication. Sheriff, would you like to say anything?
On behalf of our family and the citizens of Union County, we want to thank you for this. Thank the Risk Management Board. I know a lot of those folks on there were my father's true friends, and I know he'll be missed, and he sure misses you guys, and thank you for your friendship. But I'd like to thank the Boys Ranch for recognizing him. He and my grandfather both, they thought the world of the Boys Ranch. And I know that they put a lot of effort and a lot of heart into it, but thank you for recognizing him and my family, and we appreciate it.
I'm going to go ahead and call our program director back up, Ms. Amber Freeze.